Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us today. Sure appreciate it. I really appreciate our guest, Dr. Jerrica Dodd, who's with Your Pharmacy Advocate. We'll be introducing her in just a second. Welcome, Jerrica.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to be in webinar format. Again, we just do this so that we can tape the program. And let me start by talking about Purse Power briefly. Purse Power is working to help women use their massive purchasing power to drive positive change. Women make 80% of all purchasing decisions. If we would choose to buy from the companies that actively promote women, and we would do that in mass, we could drive change in a hurry. So that's what we're hoping to do. The purpose of the calls is to really connect female entrepreneurs across the United States with each other and around the world. Actually, we have some folks that attend internationally. And we want to connect you with each other and help provide resources, hear from some national experts, and just connect during this difficult time. I want to shout out to special guests. I believe that Jean Kelly and Lou Kerr are on board here today, and they are two of our original investors, and they're wonderful people. Thank you for being here. So I'll introduce Dr. Dodd. Please share your comments via chat, and I'd love for you to introduce yourselves to each other, please. And then we'll ask questions later in the broadcast, and we'd like to have you ask those to the questions link. So to start, Dr. Jerrica Dodd is a pharmacist, entrepreneur, coach, and leader who's going to be talking about prioritizing your health in the time of COVID. She holds a Doctor of Pharmacy degree, a Master of Science in Pharmacy Administration, and a Master of Science with a focus in Applied Pharma Economics. I was going, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, from the University of Florida. She's been a pharmacist for 22 years, and she transitioned into being a full-time entrepreneur relatively recently after a 17 career in the pharmacy industry. She founded Your Pharmacy Advocate to help patients more effectively manage their own health care. And I was really impressed with her when I heard about that business. I thought, gosh, we all really, really need that. She also is the proud executive editor of Pharmacist Magazine, which celebrates women in pharmacy. So welcome, Jerrica. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. It's good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. All right, so let's go ahead and start. We'd like to find out more about you, who you are, and how you arrived at this point in your life and career.
Oh, wow. Well, like you said, I have been a pharmacist for 22 years, and I am originally from the Atlanta area, Marietta, Georgia specifically, if you've heard of Marietta. And I have practiced in the pharmaceutical industry for 17 years of my career. And in 2018, I was faced with some health challenges such that I had to make some very tough decisions. Just to give you a little background, 4 years ago, I had brain surgery and recovered from that. And 2 years after that recovery, started having unrelated health challenges again, and was actually falling asleep while I was driving. And that got to be a concern because when I'm, in the neurologist's office trying to get to the bottom of what's going on, because I do not have narcolepsy, which is usually what you would think of first. What I realized was that I really needed to prioritize my health and put my health first, because I think I had been, you read, the education and the career, but I can say that my health had never been truly a top priority. It was kind of something that, was just there, and I tended to it when it required me to.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. So we're entering this really dark time on COVID. And by the way, I'm so sorry you went through those health challenges. I'm glad you've come out the other side. Congratulations. All right. So we're entering this really dark time, and it sounds like the next couple of months are going to be really rough. Given your medical background, beyond the things that we've heard on TV and things like that about what we can do, what are some suggestions that you have for staying healthy during this time?
So one of the things that I talk to patients about is prioritizing your health. And oftentimes, as I've explained in my own situation, our health kind of becomes on autopilot until something hurts bad enough, until something gets our attention such that we can't keep functioning that way. And so I have a saying that I really believe that our health is our responsibility. If we have the mental capability and capacity, that our health is our responsibility. It's not the responsibility of our doctor. It's not the responsibility of our spouse or even our adult children, if that applies. Our health is our responsibility. And so it's so important to be in tune to preventative measures that you can take for your health, as well as responding in a timely manner when you get those signs and signals that something's not right, something's off. Oftentimes, I think that as women, we tend to rationalize and go, "Oh, it'll be okay. Oh, I've got something else to do, so I'll take care of that, in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months, maybe in a couple of years." And so I think it's so important that you become, I used to say, the CEO of your health, because no one else knows your body like you do. And if you are not in charge of your health, then I feel like you'll just kind of get swept in a current of whatever, instructions or whatever suggestions are given. But I think that you need to be in control.
Absolutely. So some of the things we have heard of is like things we can do, vitamin D or how much water intake, sugar intake. I mean, any other thoughts around those kinds of things?
Yes. And so one of the things that I'll say is that I know that when the pandemic started, probably earlier in the year, I too was guilty of going to the grocery store and buying comfort foods, if you will. And what I realized was that my groceries had a lot of sugar in them, and that is not a good thing. And I think it's natural to reach for comforting foods, especially during stressful times. But I would say that one of the things that is really important is to eliminate as much sugar as possible, because sugar is not good. It's not good for your immune system. And so in this time when we're dealing with a pandemic and a virus that definitely we're still learning about, as the days go on, things like cutting out sugar, getting adequate rest, making sure that you give the body a chance to rest and rejuvenate, getting enough water. Sometimes I can get through the end of the day and I realize I've only had a glass of water versus the amount of water that I really need. And so, especially with us having different routines, being at home and not in our usual environment. So making sure that you get enough water. And I definitely say that vitamin D is important as well, because overall vitamin D is very good support for the immune system. And it's there, depending on what chronic illness you are taking a look at, vitamin D has been shown that if those levels are low, the immune system is definitely impacted.
Yeah. And I've heard it really does play into COVID, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of increasing.
When I've been asked that, what type of health issues set people up to have a worse prognosis with the coronavirus, and weight, obesity, and diabetes, and chronic illness just in general. But I would say obesity and diabetes have definitely been called out, repeatedly. And so it might seem like those are epidemics that our country is dealing with anyway, outside of a pandemic, an obesity epidemic and a diabetes epidemic. So it's really important to understand that those situations alone can lend to a worse prognosis, if you will.
Yeah, and at least the weight thing we've got some control over.
Yes. And I wholeheartedly believe that diabetes and weight are things that we do have control over. And so it might seem simple that I was saying, I had to take a look at my groceries when I was first, when we were first headed into the pandemic, because I thought, I can't come out the other side of this eating this way. This will not be good. So very important that we take control and do the things that we can do, because unfortunately, with healthcare the way it is, now's not the time to go to the hospital. Like, even if it's for some other condition or some other ailment, I would, say that it's so important to be in tune with your health and take as best care of yourself as you can, because you don't want to go to the hospital or have to even, be integrated into a medical system like that at this time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, gosh, I mean, everybody is so stressed out. We're trying to work from home, and we've got kids at home, and we're trying to do the school thing, and we're attending Zoom calls. We've got to run businesses. What are the implications of this stress, and what can we do to mitigate it?
Well, first of all, definitely acknowledging that there is stress, because sometimes I think we just kind of go and go and go, and we don't realize and we don't take stock of the amount of stress that we're under. Our bodies are amazing, and they tend to adapt as much as they can to deal with whatever it is that's coming our way. However, even just acknowledging the changes that have taken place. So you have people, like you said, who are homeschooling children, and that wasn't what they were doing a year ago this time. And so the world has changed, our lives have changed, how we even do business has seen significant changes as well. So it's very important to understand that we've experienced a lot in a very short amount of time. So I think it was March when everything really started to change for our world, much less our country, and understanding that can be stressful. The other piece with regard to stress is understanding that, though tempting, especially when we first entered the pandemic, but it was like the news was a constant barrage of information and then negative information. And so I think you have to be very aware of what type of devices that you're putting in front of yourself. So the TV and the phone and every way that you can get information, that can be stressful as well. It can be really overload for the brain, such that if you're, going to bed at night and your mind is still going because you're thinking over all of the information that's been downloaded and that you've heard in a day's time, thinking about, our exposure, because now we are home. So we're likely in front of screens more often, and just not only the physical stress of sitting, as well as the eye strain of being on screens a lot more than maybe we were before, but just the impact of looking at a screen all day. And then, if you're one of those people that you go to bed and you've got like your phone and you're, trying to look at things, right before you go to sleep, that can be stressful. And so when you think about stress, it can definitely impact the immune system, which we were just talking about. And we need our immune systems to be as healthy as possible, because that's, one of the best ways that we can avoid contracting, if you will, the coronavirus. So understanding that the ways that we encounter stress, the amount of stress that we endure, and understanding the impact of all of that is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that stress drives a lot more illness than people realize.
Oh, yes,
right?
Especially chronic illness. So when you think about, usually people don't necessarily identify diabetes with stress, but definitely you can stress your body such that diabetes can be a concern, or it can, make it worse, if you will. High blood pressure. There are definitely many chronic illnesses that stress can cause. And so it's really important to mitigate as much stress as possible. Then there's I didn't even mention, but there's the relational stress. A lot of people are finding themselves home with their families, and not that they don't love them, but they're not used to being together all the time, day in and day out. And the stress of not being able to go and do the things that we normally would do in pre-pandemic times. So lots of stress at this time.
Yeah, it's very impactful. All right. So in addition to all that, right, a lot of us have elderly parents that we're worried about. And you've got the whole holiday thing. I've got 3 college kids, and I'm worried about them coming home and what they're going to expose us to. I guess you might have talked about some of the things that are at greatest risk. I mean, if you have some of those illnesses you were just talking about, do you have any other ideas for how to keep everybody safe?
So one, I think, and it's so interesting when you consider, just human behavior and some of the things that we do without even thinking, because that's just what we do. But I think that when you are thinking about coming into contact, like you said, with your college children who are coming home or elderly parents, I think it's really important to employ social distancing. I think that and mask wearing are definitely ways to avoid spreading the virus. However, I'm sure that can be even challenging when everybody's in the same house. I think that the elderly are especially more frail, if you will, in terms of this. And so just being aware of your contact, being aware of, I know it's a strange thing, but it's been a long time since I've even hugged my parents because they're elderly and they have chronic illnesses. And I just want to be sure that I don't introduce anything to them that could be detrimental to their health. So I think awareness is truly important because, like I said, we kind of start to function like we normally do because it's hard. It's rather abstract until it impacts you.
Right. Well, it's very tough not to hug my kids, or you get into your normal patterns, and it's like, oh man, I'm doing something risky.
Yes, it's a natural thing to do when you see people that you love and you haven't seen them in a while. The first thing you want to do is to hug them. And I'll tell you, I had to attend, unfortunately, 2 funeral memorial services for family members that I lost this year during the pandemic. And that's the natural inclination when I attended the memorial, one, to comfort the bereaved, to say hello because you haven't seen each other in so long. And so it's you do it and you're not even thinking. And then so it really is, even that can be stressful, trying to remember all of the things to do and not to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And 6 foot's longer than you think, right? Apart, too. That's the other thing. Right. Okay, all right. So you work with patients and you take them through an assessment of their health and the medications that they're taking, and you try to help them be healthier. What would you recommend that we do, particularly if we have to take a lot of medications or we have these health issues? Can you give us kind of a high level?
Sure. So when I work with patients, one of the things that I do is I spend an extensive amount of time in that first call to find out not only what their medications are, that is important, but I ask questions about what supplements are they taking, what over-the-counter medications are they taking, because they may not think about, oh, I take, Tylenol at least once or twice a week, or, things like that have not been prescribed. So I definitely try to uncover, are there any natural substances that you are using, anything holistic, so that I have a complete picture of all that's going on. Then I spend time finding out what their life is like. So I really believe that, especially when we're talking about chronic illness, that a lot of chronic illness is tied to our food and our movement, or lack thereof movement. So I asked them to get an understanding, what's life like for you? Are you on the go all the time? Are you eating in the car? What are your habits? Those are the things that I think are really important. I ask about potential sources of stress, because I think that has to be taken into consideration as well. And then I also spend time asking them, what are their goals for their health? So sometimes I think that as patients in healthcare systems, we can kind of get caught up and no one ever asks, well, what are your goals? What outcomes do you want to see? And oftentimes we, as healthcare professionals, we're making recommendations, and that's what may possibly be best. But if that patient isn't, I feel that we should allow patients to have a say in the outcomes they want in their health, and not just, push them, but, work with them, have conversations, because it's ultimately their health. So those are the things that I do, even asking about food specifically, so that I can understand how the foods that they eat most commonly may or may not interact with any of that list of supplements, over-the-counter prescriptions, what have you, that they may be taking. All of that is important in assessing the patient fully.
Okay, so how can we act as an advocate for ourselves? So I've got a daughter, a teenage, college-age daughter again, and her doctors were prescribing various medications that were like, she'd go from generic to not generic to generic, and it was messing with her. And then she also had a heck of a time talking her doctor into doing some tests. My daughter's scary smart. She'd done a ton of research. She thinks she figured out what's going on with her, but the doctor just wouldn't listen. And how do we act as advocates for ourselves?
So one of the things that, and so kudos to your daughter for asking for what it was that she felt that she needed. And so I would definitely say that that's something important to do. But I'll step back and say that even as a baseline, I think it's important, before you have a doctor appointment, that you actually sit down and think about what you want to talk about. Don't just show up and go, oh yeah, I've been having these symptoms, because your recall is likely going to be challenged because you're in a different environment and you're trying to remember everything in that moment. But spend time writing down what's been going on. Why have you even requested this visit? What goals you have, what you're hoping to get resolved or accomplished. And take that in, even if it's digital in your phone, it's a digital record, or if you write it down on a notepad, so that you go into that appointment prepared for the conversation. It's almost, I tell patients, it's like you're having a business meeting about your health. And it's not like you saunter on in, you hop up on that table and go, well, let's see, what can we talk about today? You go in and you have prepared. So like I said, so that you can ask for the things that you need. If you are asking for something that you feel that you need, and you're not feeling that you're being heard or considered by the healthcare practitioner, then my suggestion would be get a second opinion, maybe even a third opinion if you need to, because sometimes I feel that as patients, we forget that we are also the consumers of healthcare. So if you are working with a practitioner and you don't feel that your responses or that your questions are being acknowledged or even considered, then maybe it's time to have a conversation and say that, or look for a second opinion or even a new practitioner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So both my sisters are doctors, and I think that, I'm not talking about my sisters here, but sometimes doctors think they know best and they don't listen as well as we wish they would to the patient. So I think that's a great point. All right, I asked friends for some questions, so I've got a few that are more generic questions for you. All right, so at what point should you stop taking a medication that's not working for you, and how do you talk to doctors about that? So if it's no longer working, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And this may also tie to the question that we're just speaking about as well. So it may help answer, provide additional insight to that question. If you feel that a medication is not working, then I feel like that's definitely a conversation with that healthcare practitioner. I don't advocate for patients to just stop taking things on their own, because depending on the medication, it may need to be what we call down titrated, if you will, so that you're slowly taken off in a stepwise fashion, because it's possible that, and we find that a lot with antidepressants or antipsychotic drugs, that if you just stop taking them and go cold turkey, that can become a problem. And then you can, have a crisis that was precipitated just by the fact that you stopped taking them. Or for example, when you stop taking blood pressure medicine, I remember, I will never forget being in pharmacy school, and we, one of the first exposures that we got to kind of that hands-on look at, patients and healthcare in the hospital. I remember seeing a patient in the hospital that had stopped taking her blood pressure medicine just because she decided she wasn't going to take it anymore, and she had a stroke. And so I think that before you start taking things into your own hands and go, oh, I'm not doing this anymore, have a conversation. Even if you have to call and leave a message and say, I want someone to call me back, I need to talk about this. And that goes for if you're having effects of from the medication that you weren't expecting to have, or side effects that are problematic, then have a conversation, make a phone call. Don't just assume that, it'll be all right, it'll go away. And in the case of you feel it's not working, I'd still say have that conversation. One of the things that I think is important that you can do is, I feel that healthcare practitioners may work better if they have data. So if you march into your doctor's office and say, I don't want to take this blood pressure medicine anymore, but it's not as impactful if you had gone in with a notebook and said, look, I measured my blood pressure every day or every however often, and here's the record, because now we're looking at data versus a feeling of, I just don't want to do this anymore. And so I think to have objective conversations with your healthcare practitioner is more helpful if you have data.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting. I've heard them joke, my sisters joke about people, Dr. Google, that patients go in and Google stuff. And I'm sure it drives them crazy sometimes, but to your point, I mean, doing the research and okay.
Well,
all right.
and bringing that data, your own data, like what's going on. So if you're having symptoms, right, keep a journal of how often you're having those symptoms. Is it every night, or is it just a couple of nights a week? Keep a journal of your blood sugar and your blood pressure and these types information, so that when you go in to have that conversation, you give the doctor something to work with, because you're providing more information about what's going on when you're not there.
Got it. Okay. All right. So prescriptions have expiration dates. What danger is there associated with taking medication after that date? And then the other question was, if we've got a medication that we should get rid of, how do we get rid of it? Go ahead.
So with regard to taking things after the expiration date, I would not try to figure out what's okay to use after the expiration date and what's not. And I think it also depends on how long past the expiration date. Are you talking like it expired yesterday, or it's been expired for 3, 6, 9 months, a year now? That's different. So I think it's important to, one, make sure, if at all possible, just to not take things past the expiration date, and then you don't have to worry. Sometimes you can take expired meds and they not be as effective anymore because they have truly expired. And so you may be taking something that you feel is going to help you. However, it's not helping because it's lost its potency, if you will. So you want to be very, very careful. And that's why I said I don't feel that patients should try to decide what's good past the expiration date or not. I think that if you have medications, you want to make sure to get them refilled, or, whenever needed, so that you're not dealing with expired meds, and definitely get rid of meds that are expired. The DEA usually has a medication take back. I call it a drug take back day. And that happens usually a couple of times throughout the year. And you can always go to their website and take a look. And I would say, especially for controlled substance medications, so narcotics or pain medicines, we don't want those to fall into the wrong hands. If someone, comes to your house and gets into your medicine cabinet, you may think, oh, well, they're fine, they're just there, but that can cause a problem, in and of itself, just, having medications like that falling into the wrong hands. And then you can always ask your local pharmacist at the pharmacy for disposal recommendations as well.
Okay. All right. So guys, be coming up with your questions. I'm going to be asking for those in just a minute. I wanted to ask you another question, then we'll go to the attendees. So I know you're connecting women in pharmacy through pharmacists. We're trying to connect female entrepreneurs with each other. How do you think women can best take advantage of these networking opportunities and connections that we're trying to make for them right now?
Well, I think I think now that we're in a pandemic season, if you will, it's a great opportunity to catch up with people that you haven't talked to for a while because life was so busy beforehand. And I actually was talking with a friend, and she was wanting to reconnect with some of the people on her list. And she was like, yeah, but I haven't talked to them in so long. I don't want them to think, this way or that way because I'm, out of the blue, I'm calling. And I said, you know what? Everyone is experiencing this pandemic, no matter who you are. And I said, I'm sure that they're not sitting and thinking, well, why hasn't she called me? They probably would welcome the call from you because they haven't heard from you in a long time. It would be a day brightener because, we're all trying to figure out all this change, and, our days are definitely full of Zoom calls and just things that they weren't composed of before. So with that, I encouraged her. I said, reach out. I said, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And she did. And she talked about how many people were so happy to hear from her. I think you and I had the same experience earlier this week in that you picked up the phone and you gave me a call and I was like, oh, hey. And so I think it's a great time to stay connected, though I know I'm starting to hear people say they have fatigue from being on lots of virtual calls. I think it's an opportunity to maybe learn a skill that you didn't have time to do before because everything's online. But I have seen some really creative networking virtual calls that I think have been, fun, where they've put people in specific groups, or they've had like a 30-minute networking call where there's a speaker, but everyone gets to introduce themselves and all that has to be done in 30 minutes. They had trivia. I mean, lots of fun things I've been seeing are being done. And so I think it's a great way to stay connected with people.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, the other thing that's occurring to me, there was a gal who reached out on Facebook and said, guys, I know people are struggling right now. If you don't have enough to eat, if you've got some real issues, I want to help you. I mean, I think your point about reaching out to raise each other's spirits is fantastic. And there are people that are really struggling right now that you may not know it, right? Unless you call.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a great opportunity to serve. And I know we just came through the holiday season in November, and we're headed into another holiday. We're in the midst of a holiday season and headed, for another couple of holidays at the end of this month and early January. And there are people, not only because it's the holiday season, but just also because of the pandemic or just life in general, who really could use connection, who really could use someone to share what they have or serve. And so I think there are awesome opportunities to do that during this time, which definitely give us something to do and keep our minds off of Zoom fatigue, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys, would you add your questions in chat? You got the opportunity to talk to a pharmacist. I think this is a great opportunity to talk about her health and ask any questions you might have. I'm going to ask another one from Kitty Asbury. She's the person I went to that gave me some of these ideas while you put your questions in the box here. Let's see here. So the danger associated with not completing a course of medication. So, I mean, I know like my kids and stuff, they want to take half of it and forget about it. They feel better. And I think that that's really risky, but would you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So oftentimes when we start feeling better, we get a little amnesia about how we felt that even sent us to need that prescription in the first place. And so it's really important that if you have been given a course of medication for a specific time, that you use it for all of that time. Oftentimes we think of antibiotics first when we think of people not finishing a course. And it's very dangerous in that not finishing a course of antibiotics actually encourages drug-resistant strains of bacteria. I mean, and so, of that virus, or I'm sorry, not the virus, the bacteria. So with that, then now when that bacteria becomes stronger and you're reinfected, it takes more than what was initially used to treat it, because I keep saying the virus. I think I keep thinking about the pandemic. I'm sorry. The bacteria has become smarter, and it has mutated such that that antibiotic is not as effective against it as it used to be. So it's very, very important to make sure that you're using a course of medication, whether it be steroids, whether it be antibiotic, that you're using it as advised and as prescribed. And then for courses of medication that are just ongoing, as we talked about earlier, take it as you're supposed to. Don't try to play your own doctor and go, oh, no, I'm done. I don't need this anymore. So it's very important to use medications as prescribed to get the best effect, if you will.
So welcome. Sure, absolutely. Okay, so let's see here. What is the pharmacist at your pharmacy? I'm not sure what that means. Would you clarify that question, Barbara? And just come back with more of your question. I'm not understanding as well as I should. Susan Cheers is asking, what would you recommend a dose of vitamin D be for women?
So I think that the dose would be dependent on what your vitamin D levels are. And so oftentimes we, especially now that we're spending a lot more time indoors, if you have a darker complexion because you have melanin in your skin, there are all types of variables that can impact your vitamin D level. So I would say that it's important to have your vitamin D level drawn at least once a year when you go to the doctor, such that you can see what your level is, and then you're able to be either prescribed if you need higher doses or recommended maintenance doses over the counter. So I think that's a little bit more than just a dose to say, here, use this dose. I think it's important for you to know your vitamin D level so that you can get the dose that's right for you.
Right for you. Well, I've heard you can actually overdo it too. I've heard that if you get too much, it's not good.
Right, you're right. Because vitamin D is it's a fat soluble vitamin, which means that it's not going to just be washed away through your kidneys, if you will. So you don't want to have levels that are too high because you're taking too much. And that's why I said that's a question that's a little bit more complex of an answer, because I think it's important for you and your practitioner to know what your vitamin D levels are. Like I said, things like the melanin in your skin can impact even how much vitamin D you're able to absorb from the sun. And if you're not even in the sun very much, then there could be challenges there. So I'd say get that vitamin D level
checked by your doctor. Okay. All right. So Jane Beckendorf is asking, is what are your thoughts about using artificial sweeteners in place of sugar?
So
if we don't want sugar.
Right.
Yeah.
My thoughts about artificial sweetener are that your body doesn't necessarily recognize artificial sweetener any different than it does sugar. And so I think that I'm not a big fan of artificial sweeteners. I definitely would recommend that if you are going to use an artificial sweetener, you use something that's more natural, because I guess you would say the mainstream artificial, I'm trying not to, start calling out brand names because that's not, the business that I'm in. But I would say that the more mainstream artificial sweeteners that are not considered to be more natural are not necessarily the best option. Our body, if you're intaking artificial sweetener, your body doesn't know the difference, and it can make you continue to want more, just like sugar does. And so I say that if you're going to, if you've got to consume something, I would prefer sugar if it has to be, but over artificial sweetener. So I would, if you've got to drink a Coke, and here we are, I just said I wasn't trying to do brand names. If you've got to drink a soda or a pop, I would prefer that's so hard to do because it's a brand name, but it's also like it's a noun.
Right.
I would prefer the regular over the diet. However, I would actually prefer neither.
Okay. So Barbara Gwen, let's see here. So she's saying under your name, your email has pharmacist at your pharmacy advocate. So I think she's just wanting clarification, maybe how to find you. And then she's also asking is, how do you know what is a natural artificial sweetener? How can you tell what that is?
Okay. So I am a pharmacist, and Your Pharmacy Advocate is the name of my business. And I know we're going to do some contact information coming up, but I'm not sure where she is seeing that, but I am the founder and the CEO of Your Pharmacy Advocate, and I am a pharmacist. And if there's an email, it's drjdodd@yourpharmacyadvocate.com. So that's how to reach me by email if she sees that somewhere. So I'm hoping that answers her question. And then she says, how do you know what is natural and artificial? So oftentimes we see, and I'm not necessarily making a recommendation because I don't know her, the person that's asking, and I don't, she asked me to type my email in the chat.
Yeah, there you go.
Then I'll answer, let's see, let me type it so that it can go to everyone. All right.
Perfect. Yeah, we were struggling yesterday with her email address, so I'm just going to let her do it rather than me trying.
And then this is the website. And I'm thinking I got that with no typos and trying to type fast.
There you go.
So in knowing what is a more natural sweetener, and I'm not making a recommendation, but honey, molasses, agave nectar, stevia, you've heard some people say, those tend to be the ones that are more natural compared to some of the other sweeteners that are used. So and then, fruit, definitely, if we curb our sugar intake, our processed sugar intake, fruit actually becomes sweet to us. And so it's amazing when you start to pull back on the processed sugar and sugary drinks and sugary foods, and then you eat fruit and you go, wow, and you really taste the sweetness of it.
Very good point. All right, so Jane Beckendorf is asking, what are the side effects of too much vitamin D?
Too much vitamin D can cause you to have neurological side effects. And so while it doesn't happen very frequently, it can. And so again, I would stress that I would say that you're going to be at a greater risk of having vitamin D levels that are not enough versus having high vitamin D levels. And that's why I think it's important just to have your vitamin D level checked once a year.
Okay. All right. So Y Harris is asking, how are the research participants being given the COVID-19 relative to their pharmacy history? So are they taking a pharmacy history into consideration, I guess, when they're doing research with these COVID-19 participants in the vaccine?
Yes, I would imagine so. One, because that's the way that clinical research is performed just in general, but I would really imagine so because of the high level of scrutiny and the high level of visibility that the clinical trials have that are going on now. So generally, and I'm speaking just in general, and I would imagine that this is the case, in general, people are enrolled in clinical trials and they're asked their medical history, they're asked their prescription medications and any other types of treatments that they have had, because it's very important to make sure that there is no bias introduced, if you will, because if bias is introduced in someone that's entered in a trial and they're taking a medication that they shouldn't be on in order to be in that trial, it's very important to understand that it is possible that confounds the data or the results. And so many times it's important, or it's protocol that people are asked lots of screening questions to make sure that they are appropriate candidates for the trial. So I can't imagine that has not been done in this case.
Yeah, boy, that's going to get complex, isn't it? They get the vaccine approved, but then how does it interact with everything else?
Right, and those are things that we might not know right away, because oftentimes when you're having a clinical trial be performed, it's looking for something very specific at that time. And so if there is any understanding that there could possibly be any interactions, then I'm sure they would say, you know, well, let's look at these particular medications. But in the long run, that may not be the case. They may not know that. And so it may not be something that's found out for a while.
Sure, sure. Okay, so Jean Kelly is saying, my mom takes thyroid medicine. She's 95. She also on a medication for her bladder, vitamin D, AREDS too. Sarah, you can see the question, I think. Can you see the question?
Let's see, I can bring up the question.
Yes, okay. Does she have to take this separate from her other morning meds? I'll let you lead that.
I can't answer that online. I would need to have an offline conversation to be able to look at everything else. Number one, I would need to establish a relationship. And so I can't answer that here because I don't know your mom, and there's a lot more to just the medication she's on. Thank you for trying to provide as much information as you could in your question, but there's still more to her life and her history and all kinds of things. So not something that I can answer online, but if you are interested in learning more about our services, by all means, I've listed the website there. I can actually, if that's okay, Don, I can put the phone number there as well.
Sure, please, go ahead, yep. Okay. Yeah, she's also asking about exercising, lowering A1C, and apparently sweeteners have raised it. I don't even know what that is, but is this enough? Go ahead.
Your hemoglobin A1C is a snapshot of your blood sugar or your blood glucose levels over the period of 90 days, 3 months. And so it's not just, so one meal in itself is not going to make a difference really with regard to your hemoglobin A1C, because you're looking at your blood sugar level over time, if you will. How have your blood sugars been over this period of 90 days? So one of the things, to answer the question about exercise lowering the A1C, what happens with exercise is exercise is good in that it helps our body be more sensitive to insulin. And when our body is more sensitive to insulin, then that helps in controlling our blood sugar levels. So indirectly, I don't know that I would say exercise lowers your A1C, but just to understand what happens is exercise helps the body be more responsive and more sensitive to insulin. And in that regard, then insulin is able to do its job, which is to regulate our blood sugar levels, our blood glucose levels. And then in that regard, your A1C should be more stable, if you will, because of you exercising. So exercise, as long as it's approved by your healthcare practitioner and it's what you're able to physically do, should not hurt at all.
Okay. All right. Jean saying, of course, thank you. All right. So let's see here. Barbara Gwynn, thank you so much. Is drinking a gallon of water daily dangerous?
Oh gosh, it's interesting because I was having that conversation recently with some colleagues, and I think that our water intake varies from person to person. So oftentimes you hear get 8 ounces of water a day. I mean, 8-ounce glasses of water a day, drink. And I think that's good because we do need water to flush our system, to flush our kidneys, to move toxins through our bodies. However, everybody, I don't think everybody has the capability to drink the same amount. I mean, my bladder may not be able to hold that amount of water. And so I think you have to understand how get an understanding or develop an understanding of how much water your body needs. And it's important to, I would say, I would drink water before I would drink other things. So oftentimes sugary drinks will take the place of water. And I would say to drink your water first, even with regard to caffeinated beverages and coffee or whatever it is that you like to drink. Understand, number one, since I brought up caffeine, that caffeine can be dehydrating. So if you're drinking caffeine, then you need to consider having more water because it can be dehydrating. So I think you have to do what's best for you. And I don't necessarily have a blanket statement that says everyone should drink a gallon of water, because there is such thing as drinking too much water. And I won't say that a gallon is too much, but if you drink it's almost like how we talked about vitamin D, too much of anything is not good. So the same would go for water. So I would start drinking water and would increase as you can, and then watch how your body responds, because number one, it's going to take your bladder a little time to get used to this this volume that you've increased. But again, I don't necessarily say that everybody should be drinking a gallon of water. We do need to be hydrated, and we need to be well hydrated. However, I don't know that I think that's a challenge to say everybody drink a gallon.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. All right, fantastic questions, guys. Great job. All right, so at the end of the day, what do you most want the people attending the call today to have learned from you?
At the end of the day, I want people to understand that your health has to be a priority. No matter if you're a healthcare professional or not, if you're even, interested in health or not, your health still has to be a priority, because whatever it is that you are here in this world and on this earth to do, you can't do it if you don't have your health. So your health has to be priority. It has to be on your mind. It has to be your focus, because if not, if you don't have your health, I would say not a whole lot else matters.
Yeah, fair enough. Any other points in terms of learnings from you? That's a really important point.
I would say, in terms of additional learning, that you be in charge of your health and be your own advocate, and then look for healthcare professionals that you feel also are advocating with you, and that you can, quote unquote, put them on your team. I know that's not generally what we think about with regard to our health, but I've had healthcare practitioners that I've had to make the decision that they weren't the best for my healthcare team because I wasn't getting the outcomes that I wanted to see in my health and the support that I needed from them. So I think it's important to understand that you have options, and that you deserve to be heard, and that you deserve to be able to ask questions and have a say in what happens in your health. And you're not just an innocent bystander that's just kind of going with the flow. You need to be in charge of your health. So number one, make it a priority. Number two, you be in charge. You ask the questions that you want to know the answer to, and that and make sure that you remember that you are the consumer of health.
Absolutely. Good reminder. Really good reminder. All right. What actions would you like us to take after this call? What are the top things that we should do?
So number one, and I actually was teaching earlier this week, and I said, I know that everyone has heard this before, but you would be surprised how many people don't do it. You need to have a list of your medications, your supplements, your over-the-counter medications. And I think it's important that you have that information on your phone, in your purse, in your wallet. Leave a copy on your kitchen counter, because and even give it to someone, maybe your emergency contact. If you've got someone listed that you list as your emergency contact, make sure that they have a list, and that list is kept up to date of the medications or the supplements or anything that you're using, because if there's an emergency, no one would know but you, potentially, what medication, supplements, over-the-counter meds that you're using. So that is very, very helpful. And make sure that people, I say that it's important to involve the necessary people in your health. So in your life. So if you have a spouse and if you have adult children, if you have a trusted friend, to involve them so that they understand what's happening in your health in case there is a time when someone has to ask them questions or they have to speak on your behalf, they have some idea of what's going on. So I think that it's important to decide who you trust with sharing your health information to make sure that you're not the only keeper of that information and other people are aware.
Excellent point. That is a really good point. And particularly with your parents. I used to keep the documentation for my parents with me all the time. All right. So we've got another question here. So this meeting was a great blessing. One last question. If you're doing your research online, what are good sites for doing the research?
So I don't know that I have any particular site that I recommend because, as you said, healthcare practitioners can get to be a little, vexed when you come in and you've printed out things. I think that, and people go to Dr. Google, I'm sure, often, and I know that there are even sites where you can run them through symptoms. You can put your symptoms and it can, spit out whatever it possibly could be. I think you have to be really careful with looking up things online and making sure that you're not the type personality that is going to become worrisome or worried about, if you will, whatever it is you see. Because if you look up something and let's say, for example, God forbid, it says this could be malignant or this could be, tumor or whatever, then there could be days or weeks before you got to see a healthcare practitioner and you worry yourself. And there we talked about stress earlier. So I think you have to really, the caveat I feel in using the internet to research is it could be a double-edged sword. And so I think it's really important that you don't allow it to frighten you. I think that, make notes and ask questions. I don't have a particular site, but I think if that is what you do, let the information that you come across on the internet inform the questions that you have and be a resource in that way, not something that sends you into a tailspin and you're worried and, it could or could not even be the case.
Yeah, fair enough. And guys, you're welcome to go ahead and share your ideas if you want to in the chat. If you've got some sites that you really like, you could share them there. All right. Any final words of wisdom from you, Dr. Dodd?
I would say again, that especially in these times, but even pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, our health is so, so important. And it's important that we make small incremental changes. It can be very overwhelming when we think about changes in your health. So we talked about obesity and diabetes earlier. We talked about some of the other chronic illnesses that people can experience. And that can be very daunting when you think about changing behavior, changing lifestyle. That's a lot. And as we've seen, our lifestyle and our behavior has been changed for us in the pandemic. So I think it's important to understand that you can make small choices every day. So we talked about drinking water, and maybe you're not up to the capacity of drinking the amount of water that's good for your body each day. But if you take small steps such that you get to that point, those small steps will end up being huge, having a huge impact and making huge changes. So I would say making sure that you put your health first and doing the little things over and over and over again, and you'll get there.
You'll get there. Very good. Very good. This has been an excellent, excellent conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Dodd, for being here. Really appreciate it. We've run out of time. So I want to thank you once again. And then I want to let everybody know that we've got some interesting upcoming guests. So on December 11th, I'm going to have Dr. Park Dietz. He's one of the world-renowned leaders in violence in the workplace and violence prevention. He's amazing and just a real leader in the field. On December 18th, we're going to have a virtual holiday party. And one of the thoughts I had was, let's do an ugly sweater contest. How's that sound? The 25th and the 1st, of course, are holidays, so we'll skip those 2 days. And then we'll be back on January 8th with Claudia San Pedro. She is the president of Sonic. All right, so I just want to remind everybody, please sign up for directory listing. I know that you did, Jerrica. Download our Google Chrome extension from pursepower.com. Use the directory to find women-owned and women-led businesses to buy from. I hope you like and share our social media pages. We're doing this for you, so I'd love your help getting the word out. And please let your friends know about this broadcast that we do every Friday at 10 Central. All right, let's see here. Any other things? Super call today. People enjoyed it. It was great. Dr. Dodd, thank you so much. All right, I want to remind everybody, Purse Power, we have it. Let's use it. Thank you, and we'll see you next Friday.
Bye.
Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.